You ever wake up in the middle of the night and instantly know something's wrong? Not like, I forgot to close the garage door wrong. I'm talking my body is buzzing with panic before my brain can catch up. Wrong. That's exactly how I woke up at the lake cabin. My head was pounding so hard I thought maybe I'd downed a bottle of wine I didn't remember drinking. But then I noticed something even stranger. Henry, my husband, wasn't moving. His chest was rising but so faint, so shallow, I thought he was... Oh God, I thought he was gone. And then this part will stay burned in my memory forever. He cracked one eye open, just barely, and whispered, "Stay limp." That was it. 2 words. And I knew. We weren't just sick. We weren't just tired. Something was happening in that cabin, and we were not supposed to survive it. Now, let me rewind just a little bit so this makes sense. Our son Ethan and his wife Brooke had surprised us with this romantic anniversary getaway. Cute little Airbnb-style cabin up in Wisconsin. It's got everything, Mom. Fireplace, hot tub, you'll love it. They even stocked the fridge with groceries before we arrived. Sounds thoughtful, right? Yeah, thoughtful like a fox in the henhouse. Because lying there in that room, my head pounding, my throat dry like sandpaper, I noticed details I should have clocked sooner. The windows, all sealed tight, like someone had pressed them shut. The little carbon monoxide detector that's supposed to blink by the kitchen door? Gone. Just 2 strips of old tape on the wall where it used to be. And there was this sickly sweet smell in the air, like metal and gasoline had a baby. I couldn't move without giving myself away, but I could hear. I heard Brooke's voice, way too calm for the situation. "Okay, when we call 911, you say we came up for a visit and found them like this. Make it sound like we were panicking. Don't overdo it." And Ethan, my own son? His voice was clipped, irritated, like he was rehearsing lines he'd already memorized. "I know, Brooke. We've been over this. They'll say it was the heater, carbon monoxide poisoning. Happens all the time. We'll cry. We'll be devastated. And no one will question it." Imagine hearing your child plot out your obituary like he's practicing for a play. That's when I wanted to scream, to sit up and demand an explanation. But Henry's whisper was still in my ear. "Stay limp." So I did. I let my body sink into that mattress like a rag doll. The room was spinning. My skin felt like it was buzzing from the inside out, but I kept still. Do you know how hard it is to not move when your heart is slamming against your ribs like it's trying to escape? And then, right as I thought my brain was going to explode from the pressure, I heard something unexpected. The low hum of a generator. The neighbor's generator, kicking on next door. That sound normal, every day? Nothing special suddenly became the sound of hope. Because right after it started, Brooke's voice cracked. What if someone comes over? What if they smell something?" And Ethan snapped. "Shut up. Stick to the plan. We can fix the timeline." That's when I realized they weren't worried about us. They were worried about being caught. And in the distance, sirens. Growing louder. Closer. Brooke's footsteps started pacing. Ethan cursed under his breath. And I thought, oh my God. We might actually live through this. I kept my eyes closed as the door burst open, and I felt the rush of cold night air sweep in with the firefighters. One of them muttered, "Detectors missing. Vents are taped. This isn't an accident." And as they lifted me up, my body dangling, head still spinning, I thought, my own son just tried to kill me. And the only reason I'm still here is because I pretended not to be. That was just the beginning. So when I tell people this story, the first thing they ask is, "But why would your own son want to kill you?" And trust me, I've asked myself the same question 1,000 times. To explain it, I need to rewind a little, before the cabin, before the lawyers and the detectives, back to the life Henry and I thought we had, our nice little life in Evanston, Illinois. I used to wake up to the sound of the metro train rolling by and the smell of Henry's coffee brewing in the kitchen. He always played salsa music on the old radio while he tinkered in the garage. Our neighbors knew him as the guy who could fix anything with duct tape and a hammer. And me? I was the quiet librarian down at the branch on Church Street. We weren't rich, but we were steady. And steady felt like gold. On our kitchen table sat this little ceramic bluebird. Our oldest son, Alex, made it in 5th grade art class. The glaze was lumpy, the beak chipped on one side, but it was perfect to me. That bird sat there through every birthday cake, every Thanksgiving, every late-night argument, every apology. It was like our silent family mascot. But if you've ever lost a child, you know how one object can go from comforting to haunting in a single heartbeat. See, 20 years ago, Alex didn't come home. He was 20 at the time. Bright, funny, the kind of kid who could make friends with a rock. He and Ethan had borrowed a little skiff up on Lake Mendota for a summer night ride. Only Ethan came back. The official story? Storm rolled in fast. Alex slipped, and it was just a tragic accident. That's what the police said. That's what the paperwork said. That's what Ethan said, standing there shivering in a blanket, claiming he tried to save his brother. And God help me, I believed it. I wanted to believe it, because the alternative that something darker had happened was a thought too terrifying for a mother to carry. After that, our house felt different, quieter, heavier. Ethan, our baby, was suddenly the only child left under our roof. I clung to him like a lifeline. Maybe too much. He started helping Henry in the garage, asking about business, about mortgages, about money. And at the time, I thought, wow, he's really stepping up, filling that big brother void. Now, I see it differently. But back then, in the haze of grief, all I wanted was to keep the family together. Every Sunday, we'd still do family dinners. I'd make pot roast, Henry would pour the wine, and Ethan would sit at the table pretending to be okay. And I told myself, this is enough. This is survival. Funny thing is, that's how secrets get buried. You choose survival over truth. You tell yourself everything's fine. And you let the cracks in your nice little life widen until one day they're not cracks anymore, they're cliffs. And that brings us back to Ethan. Because while I was busy trying to hold the family together, he was busy studying every weakness we had. But I'll get to that. At this point, all you need to know is this. We thought we had a stable, ordinary family life in suburban Chicago. But underneath the salsa music and the library books and the bluebird on the table, something rotten was growing. And it all started to surface the day Ethan showed up, smiled that charming smile and said, "Mom, Dad, we need to talk about your will." So, remember how I said Ethan smiled, that charming smile, and brought up our will? Yeah, that wasn't just a one-off conversation. That was the start of what I now call his campaign. It began at our kitchen table, of course, right there with that little bluebird staring back at me. Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms like he was my financial advisor, and said, "Mom, Dad, you really should simplify things. Consolidate. Make it easier for us. For me, really. You know, in case anything happens." Now, I'm not stupid. When someone under 40 starts throwing around "in case anything happens," my eyebrows go straight up. I laughed it off, like, "Honey, nothing's happening anytime soon, we're fine." But he didn't laugh. He doubled down. He slid this folder across the table like a car salesman. Inside were power of attorney forms, blank wills, even this typed-out sheet that literally said, "To protect your estate." Protect it from who? From him? Brooke chimed in, too. She was always so sugary sweet on the surface, Pinterest mom vibes, matching outfits for the kids, but she had this way of making everything sound urgent. "Oh, Linda, you don't want the government deciding what happens to your house, do you? It would just be so much easier for Ethan to handle everything. One heir, one name, no confusion. One heir. Guess who?" I wanted to snap back with something sharp, but instead, I did what I'd been doing for years. I smiled, nodded, and said, "We'll think about it." Classic me, conflict avoider extraordinaire. But later, when I was putting away dishes, I caught Brooke doing something weird. She was standing in the dining room, staring at our furniture like she was in an estate sale. She actually took a picture of the oak buffet Henry built with his own hands. When I asked her what she was doing, she just giggled. "Oh, just love the vintage look." Right, vintage. That's one way to say, "This'll fetch a nice price once you're gone." And it didn't stop there. A week later, I started getting these strange alerts from the bank. Failed login attempts. A flagged request for a wire transfer we never made. When I brought it up to Henry, he brushed it off. "It's probably a glitch, Linda. Tech stuff." But I knew better. I could feel Ethan's fingerprints all over it. The pressure ramped up every visit. Suddenly, every conversation circled back to downsizing, selling the house, or signing paperwork. At one point, Ethan actually said, "Look, Dad, the stairs in this place are a death trap. You take one bad fall and it's game over. Why not move somewhere easier before that happens?" A death trap. He looked me right in the eye when he said it, like he was already picturing it. That was the moment something in my gut shifted. The little voice that used to whisper, "You're overreacting," suddenly said, "No, you're not. This is real, and it's dangerous." But the problem? I didn't know how to confront it. I'd spent decades keeping the peace, smoothing over rough edges, convincing myself family comes first. Saying no felt impossible. So instead, I smiled through clenched teeth and changed the subject. But inside, I was screaming, "Something is very, very wrong here." And that's when I realized, if I didn't start drawing some lines, Ethan was going to bulldoze right over us. After that whole "your house is a death trap" speech from Ethan, I knew I couldn't just keep nodding and smiling my way through this. But here's the thing, I didn't have a clue how to actually push back. I'd spent 60 years being the peacemaker, the "don't rock the boat" mom, the one who kept the family glued together even when it was cracking. Saying no? That wasn't my language. So when a flyer showed up at church about a grief and boundaries group, yes, that was the actual title, Grief and Boundaries, I took it as a sign. Tuesday nights, basement rec room, folding chairs, instant coffee. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. The first night, I sat in the back thinking, what am I even doing here? I'm too old for this therapy circle stuff. I should just keep my head down, survive. But then Dr. Vijay Patel walked in, calm, kind eyes, the kind of voice that makes you feel like you're already halfway forgiven. He said, "Avoiders pay twice, once now and once later." That line hit me like a brick, because that was me, paying twice. Once when Alex died and I swallowed every question, and again now, with Ethan tightening the noose one friendly visit at a time. We went around the circle, and people started sharing. A widow who couldn't tell her kids to stop treating her like a babysitter. A dad whose adult daughter kept draining his bank account. Every story sounded too familiar. When it was my turn, I mumbled something like, "My son wants me to change my will, and I don't really know how to say no without starting a war." Nobody gasped. Nobody judged. They just nodded, like, "Yeah, we get it." That was new for me. Dr. Patel gave me homework. Write down 3 non-negotiables, things you will not compromise on, no matter what. I thought it was silly. Like, I'm 60 years old and doing homework again? But when I sat at my kitchen table later that week, staring at that little bluebird, the words spilled out. My safety, my privacy, my autonomy. 3 tiny lines on a yellow sticky note. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a little steadier. Of course, none of this was some magical transformation. The next time Ethan showed up, flashing that salesman smile, my voice still trembled. But now I had something solid under me. A reminder that I didn't have to hand over my life just to keep the peace. That Tuesday hour became my lifeline. Once a week, a place where I wasn't Mom or Mrs. Morales. I was just Linda, a woman trying to find her voice again. And trust me, I was going to need that voice. Because Ethan, he wasn't done pushing, not even close. So, you'd think after that Tuesday night epiphany, I'd be walking around like Oprah, shouting, "No is a full sentence," right? Yeah, not quite. By Friday, Ethan was back on my porch. And this time, he didn't even bring donuts, just a thick manila folder, and Melissa with her fake, "we're family" smile. He spread the folder on my kitchen table like it was show and tell. "Mom," he said, all calm and collected, "I've already drawn up some preliminary paperwork, just so you can see what we're talking about." I opened it and nearly choked on my coffee. My house, my savings, even my pension. Everything neatly listed like bullet points in a PowerPoint presentation. And here's the kicker, there were already signatures on some of the forms. Mine. Except, I never signed a thing. I looked at Ethan. "Where'd you get this?" And he didn't even flinch. He just said, "Don't worry about the details, Mom. It's just for efficiency." Efficiency. That's what he called forging his own mother's name. Melissa reached across the table, all sweet-voiced, like she was offering me tea instead of financial homicide. "Linda, you raised such a generous family. This is just making things easier for everyone. You don't want to leave a mess behind, do you?" And that's when something in me snapped. Maybe it was the therapy group rubbing off. Maybe it was that sticky note still sitting on my fridge, screaming safety, privacy, autonomy. I pushed the folder back toward them and said, "No, not happening." My voice shook, but it was steady enough to make Melissa blink. Ethan leaned back, smirking like I was a toddler refusing vegetables. "Mom, come on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That line, "don't make this harder," it was like déjà vu. Because 25 years ago, right before Alex died, I heard Ethan say those exact same words in the garage. He thought I wasn't listening, but I remembered. And suddenly the air in that kitchen got heavy. I realized this wasn't just about paperwork or money. This was about control. It had always been about control. So I smiled my best teacher voice smile and said, "Well, Ethan, you're right about one thing. I won't make this harder, because I'm calling a lawyer." The silence after that? Priceless. Melissa's smile cracked just a little. Ethan's jaw tightened. And for the first time I saw the mask slipping. But I didn't stop there. I pulled out my phone, right in front of them, and snapped a picture of the forged documents. "Receipts," I said. "You know, just in case I forget." Their faces? Worth framing. Of course, they didn't storm out like villains in a movie. They packed up, pretended everything was fine, and said they'd give me time to think. But I knew better. Because once you've got receipts, you stop being a pawn. And pawns? They don't sit quietly on the board anymore. After Ethan and Melissa left that night, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd back off. You know, lick their wounds, regroup, and try again in 6 months. But no. By Sunday morning, they were back on my doorstep with Starbucks, and those fake smiles plastered on their faces. Like I was supposed to forget they'd basically tried to rob me blind 2 days earlier. And that's when I started noticing it. The red flags. Everywhere. First, Melissa couldn't stop casually mentioning the house. "Wow, Linda, the foundation looks so old. Have you ever thought about selling before it starts crumbling?" Crumbing? Lady, my house has stood through 4 Midwest tornado warnings. It's sturdier than your marriage. Then Ethan started getting weirdly controlling. Like, out of nowhere, he asked for the password to my online banking. Said it was just in case something ever happened. I laughed right in his face. "What's the plan, Ethan? You gonna water my plants and pay my Netflix bill if I keel over?" He didn't laugh, just stared at me. And that silence? Yeah, it was scarier than anything he could have said. But the biggest red flag came on Tuesday, my sacred therapy night. I was heading out the door with my coat, and Melissa called me on the landline. The landline. Nobody under 40 uses a landline unless it's an emergency or surveillance, she said. "Oh, Linda, where are you headed? Need me to come by and keep you company?" Company. At 6:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, the exact time she knew I'd be gone. That's when my stomach dropped. They weren't just nosy. They were tracking me, testing my schedule. I told her, just Bible study, and hung up fast. But my mind was spinning. Because if they knew where I was, they knew when the house was empty. And what's one accidental fire, or slip on the stairs away from solving all their problems? At the Tuesday hour group, I unloaded everything. Dr. Patel leaned in and said, "Linda, these are not red flags anymore. This is escalation. Escalation." That word hit different, because suddenly this wasn't just about paperwork or forged signatures. This was about survival. I went home that night and double-locked every door, every window. I even dragged a chair under the doorknob like I was in some Lifetime movie. And the whole time, I kept hearing Ethan's voice in my head. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Yeah, red flags everywhere. And the worst part? I hadn't even seen the biggest one yet. So after a week of playing cat and mouse with Ethan and Melissa, double-locking my doors, dodging their drop-ins, pretending everything was fine, I thought maybe they'd cool off. Spoiler, they didn't. Instead, they showed up on my porch all smiles, holding a gift bag with tissue paper sticking out like a Hallmark ad. "Mom," Ethan said, "we've been thinking. You and Dad's anniversary is coming up. 40 years, right? That's huge. You deserve something special." Now, I don't know about you, but when a man who just tried to forge your signature suddenly wants to whisk you away for a special trip, it doesn't exactly scream romance. I peeked in the bag, new hiking boots, in my size, with the tag still on. Melissa chimed in with her syrupy voice. We booked a weekend in the Smoky Mountains. Just the four of us. Fresh air, gorgeous views, family bonding. Family bonding? Please. These people couldn't bond a Lego set. And here's the kicker, Melissa added. Don't worry about planning a thing. We'll handle everything. You just relax and enjoy. Yeah. Translation. Don't pack a parachute. We'll bring the cliff. I plastered on my best teacher smile and said, Oh wow, that's thoughtful. Inside, my stomach was doing somersaults. Because I knew this wasn't about celebrating 40 years of marriage. This was about closing a 40-year account. The house, the pension, the life insurance, tidy little bow. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at those brand new boots. The little bluebird on the windowsill tilted its head at me like even it knew this was bad news. I called Henry. We'd been separated for a while, but still close, and I told him everything. His voice went low, steady. Linda, they're setting you up. You can't go. But here's the problem. If I refused, they'd just find another way. House fire, random robbery, who knows? At least in the mountains, I'd know what to expect. So I said, then we go. But this time, we're not walking in blind. Henry paused and then whispered something that gave me chills. I'll bring my phone. I'll record everything. That was the moment the anniversary trip turned from a death sentence into, maybe, just maybe, our chance to finally expose them. But deep down, I already knew. Either way, it was going to be the longest weekend of my life. So fast forward to Saturday morning. Ethan pulls up in his SUV, whistling like we're going on a church picnic. Melissa hops out in yoga pants and a brand new hiking jacket, looking like she just walked off an REI catalog cover. Me? I'm in those hiking boots they bought me, and let me tell you, nothing feels more cursed than wearing shoes your would-be murderers picked out. The drive to the Smokies was too normal. Melissa singing along to Taylor Swift, Ethan making dad jokes. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were the picture-perfect family. But the way Ethan kept checking the rearview mirror, yeah, it wasn't traffic he was worried about. It was whether Henry and I were catching on. We weren't just catching on, we were recording. Henry had his phone tucked in the inside pocket of his jacket, mic running the whole time. Every fake laugh, every, we're so glad you came, all of it. By the time we hit the trailhead, my heart was already racing. The woods were beautiful tall trees, fresh air, the sound of water rushing somewhere nearby. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like the opening scene of a Dateline episode. The trail started easy enough. Melissa kept darting ahead with her camera, snapping candid shots like we were going to scrapbook this nightmare. Ethan walked behind us, hands shoved in his pockets, but I could feel his eyes on my back the whole time, like he was calculating distances, angles. Then, after about an hour, Melissa gasped dramatically. "Oh my gosh, look at that view!" she squealed, pointing to a side path that led to, you guessed it, a cliff. And not just any cliff, a sheer drop, jagged rocks waiting at the bottom like open jaws, the kind of place where if someone slipped, there'd be no, oops, call 911. It would just be done. I froze. Every cell in my body screamed, don't go there, but Ethan clapped his hands together. Perfect spot for a family photo. Come on, Mom, Dad, let's make some memories. Memories. Yeah, sure. Memorials, more like it. Henry squeezed my hand so hard I thought he might break it. He whispered just low enough. The phone still rolling. So, we climbed. Step by step, loose rocks shifting under our boots. My legs felt like lead, my palms were slick with sweat, but I kept smiling like the world's dumbest tourist. At the top, the view really was breathtaking valley spread out below, river winding like a silver ribbon. And for 1 second I let myself think, this could have been beautiful, if not for them. Melissa lifted her camera. Okay, lovebirds, hug each other, smile big. I want the valley in the background. We shuffled closer to the edge. I could feel the emptiness yawning just behind me. And then Ethan stepped up, just a little too close. That fake smile on his face? Gone. What I saw instead was cold, focused, the same look I remembered the night Alex died. And that's when I knew. This was it. The push was coming. So there we were. Melissa with her camera, Ethan inching closer, Henry clutching my hand like it was the only thing tethering us to the planet. And then boom. Ethan lunged. 1 second I was standing on solid ground. The next, the world just disappeared under my feet. Everything went silent, except for the wind rushing past my ears. My stomach dropped so hard I swear it was still clinging to the top of that cliff while the rest of me plummeted. I remember thinking, so this is it? This is how my own son cashes out my life insurance. Henry shouted something I couldn't hear the words, just the raw sound of it, and then his body slammed into mine. For a split second, we weren't falling victims. We were falling together. The rocks came up fast, too fast, then impact. White-hot pain shot through me, so sharp it felt like my bones turned to glass. My head hit something. My shoulder twisted. My ribs cracked like kindling. I couldn't even scream, just gasped as the air punched right out of me. And then I heard it, Henry's voice, weak but steady. "Linda, don't move. Play dead." I wanted to laugh, play dead. What did he think this was? A bear attack? But then I realized he was right. Because just a few feet away, I heard Ethan groaning. Melissa too. They'd gone down with us. And if they thought we'd survived, yeah, we wouldn't for long. So I lay there, eyes open just enough to see sky through the trees, chest rising so shallow it barely counted as breathing, every nerve screaming, but I forced myself still. I heard Ethan grunt, dragging himself across the dirt. "Melissa, you okay?" she moaned. "My leg. Oh God, it's broken." And then she hissed, "What about them?" A pause, rustling. Then Ethan's voice, cold and flat. "They're dead. Dead." I almost smiled, because if he believed that, then maybe, just maybe, I had one last chance. Melissa laughed. Actually laughed. Finally, it worked. Now all we have to do is stick to the story. That's when it hit me. They already had their cover story planned, every word rehearsed. And now they were about to crawl out of that gorge and play the roles of their lives, tragic survivors. Meanwhile, Henry and we just had to survive long enough to make sure the truth didn't get buried with us. So there I was, sprawled out on the rocks, every bone in my body screaming, trying to remember how to not look alive. Which sounds ridiculous, but trust me, it's harder than you think. Because when you're in that much pain, your body wants to do things: twitch, cough, groan, and every instinct in me wanted to yell, "Surprise! Not dead yet, suckers!" But Henry's voice was still echoing in my head. "Play dead." And that's exactly what we did. I kept my breaths tiny, shallow, like I was barely clinging to life. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Henry lying limp, blood trickling down his forehead, his phone still tucked inside his jacket, recording. Thank God. Above us, Ethan and Melissa started scrambling. Melissa whimpered, "What if someone comes? What if they check?" Ethan snapped back, "They won't. Nobody hikes this far. By the time anyone finds them, it'll look like an accident." An accident. Right. Because couples just throw themselves off cliffs all the time. I could hear them moving, dragging themselves up toward the trail, their voices growing fainter. Melissa muttering about her leg, Ethan cursing under his breath. Every second they got further away, my heart pounded harder. But I didn't dare move. Not yet. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the sound of my own pulse hammering in my ears. Then, out of nowhere, Henry's hand twitched. Just the tiniest squeeze against my fingers. I wanted to sob with relief, but I kept my face slack, my body heavy. We waited. 5 minutes. 10. It felt like hours. Finally, when the forest swallowed their footsteps, Henry whispered so softly I almost missed it. "They think we're gone. That's our chance." I turned my head just a fraction, pain shooting through my neck, and whispered back, "Can you move?" He grimaced. "Barely, but enough." And that's when the reality hit me. Surviving the fall was only half the battle. The other half, staying alive long enough to make it back up, get help, and prove what really happened. Because Ethan and Melissa weren't just walking away from a crime scene. They were walking straight into their own alibi, and we were about to find out if playing dead could really save the living. So after what felt like forever lying there on those rocks, "Playing dead," Henry whispered, "we have to move. Now, before they come back." And let me tell you, moving was not exactly on my to-do list. My ribs felt like they'd been put through a paper shredder, my ankle was twisted at an angle it should never be at, and every breath was like sucking knives. But the idea of Ethan coming back to double-check his work? Yeah, that was enough motivation. Henry and I started crawling. Not walking, not limping, literally crawling, inch by inch, like two broken animals dragging ourselves uphill. He still had his phone recording, tucked in his jacket. Every groan, every whisper, every rustle of leaves? Proof. At one point, I looked up and saw the sky through the trees, and for a split second, I thought, we're never going to make it out of here. That's when I heard it. The faintest wail of a siren, somewhere in the distance. I almost cried. You ever hear something so ordinary it suddenly feels holy? That's what that siren was, hope on wheels. But the forest played tricks on us. One minute the sound was close, the next it faded. My head spun, my body screamed at me to just stop, lay down, let it end. And then Henry grabbed my wrist, his grip firm despite the blood still dripping down his face. "Linda," he rasped, "we're not dying here. Not like this." So we kept going. Somewhere above, I heard Melissa's voice faint, frantic. She was already spinning the story to rescuers. They just slipped. We tried to grab them, but they fell. Oh God, it all happened so fast. My jaw clenched. If I hadn't been half dead, I'd have stood up and called her out right there. Instead, Henry squeezed my hand again, reminding me we had receipts. And then, through the blur of trees and pain and panic, I saw them. Bright yellow jackets, flashlights cutting through the shadows, firefighters, paramedics, actual angels with steel-toed boots. "Two more down here," someone shouted. I wanted to scream, "Yes, we're alive, you idiots!" But all that came out was a wheeze. They slid down with ropes and harnesses, their hands steady, voices calm, like this was just another day at work. One of them leaned close and whispered, "You're safe now. We've got you." And for the first time since that fall, I let myself believe it. But even as they strapped me to a stretcher and hoisted me up, I heard Ethan's voice somewhere above, already acting his part. "We saw them fall. We thought they were gone." Yeah, he thought wrong, because dead people don't carry receipts. So after the cliff, the crawl, and the rescue, Henry and I landed in the ER like two crash test dummies. Tubes, monitors, neck braces, the whole 9 yards. I looked like I'd gone 12 rounds with a freight train, and Henry wasn't much better. But here's the wild part. Ethan and Melissa showed up at the hospital looking perfectly put together. Melissa had on fresh lip gloss. Ethan had changed into a clean shirt, like they'd stopped at Target for a wardrobe refresh on the way over, and they played their roles flawlessly. "Oh, Mom, we were so worried." Melissa sobbed, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue like she was auditioning for a soap opera. Ethan leaned over my bed, lowering his voice to that concerned son register. "Mom, you scared us half to death. We thought we lost you." I wanted to spit in his face, but I kept my lips sealed, because sometimes silence speaks louder than a scream. Here's the thing about hospitals, people forget they're crawling with professionals. Doctors, nurses, social workers, and one particularly sharp ER nurse named Janet, who wasn't buying what Ethan and Melissa were selling. She noticed things. Like how Ethan and Melissa didn't ask about our injuries, just about how long we'd need to be in recovery. Or how Melissa whispered to Ethan, "Stick to the story," right outside the curtain, thinking no one heard. Spoiler, we did. And so did Janet. Meanwhile, Henry, God bless that man, still had his phone tucked in his jacket. It survived the fall. So as soon as he had enough strength, he pulled it out and pressed play. The room filled with voices, Ethan's voice, Melissa's voice, clear as day. "Perfect spot for a family photo. Come on, Mom, Dad, let's make some memories." Followed by the sound of the scuffle, the push, the fall. Then Melissa's laughter, faint but chilling. Finally, it worked. You should have seen Janet's face. Her jaw tightened, and she said, "I'll be right back." 5 minutes later, a police officer walked in. Ethan's face drained of color. Melissa froze, mid-blink, like someone hit pause on her fake tears routine. The officer asked one simple question. "Mr. Morales, would you like to explain this recording?" And just like that, the tables flipped. Melissa stammered. Ethan tried to bluff, but the cracks showed fast. The forged documents, the bank alerts, the missing carbon monoxide detector at the cabin, suddenly all those little red flags turned into neon signs pointing straight at them. Me? I just lay there in that hospital bed, bruised and broken but grinning on the inside. Because for once, I didn't have to say a word. The receipts were speaking loud enough for everyone, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I thought, we might actually make it out of this, alive, and believed. So there we were in that hospital room. Me in a neck brace, Henry with his ribs wrapped, both of us looking like extras from a disaster movie. And across from us? Ethan and Melissa, pale, sweaty, and suddenly very quiet. The cop stood there holding Henry's phone like it was Excalibur. He pressed play again, just loud enough for the whole room to hear. Ethan's voice, crystal clear. Perfect spot for a family photo. Come on, Mom, Dad, let's make some memories. Then the scuffle. Then the sound of us falling. And finally Melissa's voice, chilling as ever. Finally, it worked. You could have heard a pin drop. The officer turned to Ethan. Sir, anything you'd like to add to that? Now, if this were a movie, Ethan would have broken down, sobbing, begging forgiveness. But no. My son smirked. Actually smirked, he said. That could have been anyone. You can't even prove it was me. Melissa, bless her heart, piped up. It's AI, deepfake. People fake voices all the time now. I almost laughed out loud laying there in my hospital gown, hooked up to an IV, listening to my would-be murderers try to blame deepfakes. Nice try, kids. The cop didn't even flinch. He pulled out a set of handcuffs. You're both coming with me. That's when the performance finally cracked. Melissa's face twisted into panic, tears smearing her mascara for real this time. Ethan's jaw tightened, his bravado draining fast. Wait, you don't understand, he barked. They're confused. They're old. They don't know what they're talking about. And oh, that was the last straw. Because Henry, who hadn't said much up to that point, propped himself up in the hospital bed, pointed right at Ethan and growled, Old doesn't mean stupid. You tried to kill us. And now everyone knows. Mike, drop. The officer spun Ethan around, cuffed him, and started reading his rights. Melissa got hers too, sobbing the whole way. Watching them shuffle out of that hospital room, hands bound, their little perfect family act shattered. It was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. I'd lost a lot that weekend: blood, trust, the illusion of safety. But in that moment I gained something back, proof. And the proof finally gave me power. Because secrets rot in silence. But the second you shine a light on them, they collapse. And Ethan and Melissa had just collapsed in real time, right in front of me. You'd think after watching your son and daughter-in-law get hauled off in handcuffs, you'd finally get to breathe. Like, okay, the nightmare's over, roll credits. But no, real life doesn't work like that. The days after the arrest were messy. Lawyers calling, detectives showing up with questions, hospital staff coming in every few hours to check vitals. And through it all, I kept thinking, my own son tried to kill me. I mean, how do you even process that? This was the kid I used to pack PB&J sandwiches for, the kid I cheered for at Little League games, even when he struck out every time. And now I had to sit across from cops describing how he shoved me off a cliff. That's not just betrayal. That's a whole new category of pain. And the guilt? Oh, it was heavy. Because part of me kept replaying all the red flags I ignored. The forged documents. The "your house is a death trap" comment. Melissa measuring my buffet like she was already listing it on Facebook Marketplace. I saw all of it. And still, I kept the peace. At the Tuesday group, I told them what happened. The whole story. The fall, the recording, the arrest. Everyone just sat there stunned. Finally, Dr. Patel said, Linda, you didn't fail. You survived. That's not weakness. That's strength. I wanted to believe him. But some nights, lying awake in that hospital bed, I wondered if my silence had cost me Alex years ago. If maybe the accident on that lake wasn't an accident at all, and I hated myself for letting that thought in. Meanwhile, Henry and I had to face the practical fallout. The house, the will, the finances. Lawyers explained how Ethan and Melissa had already tried to shift accounts, move money, even list our property behind our backs. Untangling that web was like trying to clean oil out of water. And then there were the grandkids. Two little faces who had no idea their parents were about to be on trial for attempted murder. Social workers asked if Henry and I would consider guardianship. My heart broke, because those kids didn't choose any of this. They just wanted stability. So yeah, aftershocks. Not the cinematic, dramatic kind. The slow, grinding kind where you're left to pick up pieces you never asked to hold. But here's the thing about aftershocks. They remind you the earth is still settling. Which means one day, eventually, it will settle. And I decided right then I wasn't going to live the rest of my life as someone who played dead. I was going to live out loud, even if my voice shook. So you'd think that would be the end of it, right? Ethan and Melissa in cuffs, Henry and I recovering, lawyers handling the mess. Done. Except, it wasn't. A few weeks later, a detective came by the house with a box. Said they'd been combing through Ethan's storage unit. "You might want to see this, Mrs. Morales," he told me, and set it on the table. I didn't want to open it. My hands shook, just touching the cardboard. But when I finally pulled back the flaps, I saw something I hadn't laid eyes on in over 20 years. Alex's jacket. The one he wore the night he fell from that boat. And tucked inside the pocket? A journal. The pages were water-stained, warped, barely legible in places. But one entry made my blood run cold. Alex had written about Ethan. About how Ethan was pressuring him, how they'd been fighting over money, how Alex thought Ethan was planning something reckless. The date on that entry? 2 days before Alex died. I just sat there, staring at the words, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. All those years I told myself it was an accident. All those years I buried the suspicion, swallowed the questions, chose silence over truth. And now here it was, in Alex's own handwriting. I whispered out loud, "He killed him! He killed his own brother!" The room spun. I thought of Ethan on that cliff, pushing me the same way he must have pushed Alex into the water. Same cold eyes, same smirk. And I realized Henry was right all along. Avoiders pay twice. Because by protecting the lie back then, I let Ethan grow into the kind of man who would try again. That was the second twist. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about legacy. If I stayed silent again, I'd be complicit. But if I told Alex's story, if I finally named what happened, maybe the cycle would stop here. So I picked up that journal, called the detective, and said, "Add this to your case file." And for the first time in decades, I felt like Alex wasn't just gone. He was finally being heard. Because the truth doesn't die when people do. It just waits for someone brave enough to speak it out loud.